I was 32 years old when I came home early from work on a February afternoon and found my 10-year-old son standing in our front hallway, with his winter jacket zipped to the chin, his backpack on his shoulders, and his snow boots already laced. He was not going to school. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He had not told me he was going anywhere. Behind him, my mother-in-law Pauline stood near the front door with her own coat on and her car keys looped over one finger, and she smiled at me the way you smile at someone you've been expecting. Not surprised, not caught, just ready. Arlo looked at her before he looked at me. That was the thing I could not stop thinking about in the weeks that followed. My son looked at Pauline first. Checked her face the way you check the weather, the way you look for a signal, and only when she gave him one did he turn to me. My 10-year-old had been taught to verify whether it was safe to see his own mother. I didn't understand it then. I understand it now. Understanding it is worse. My name is Lauren, and I want to start from the beginning, because if I start where I found myself standing in that hallway, none of it will make sense without the months that came before it. Brett and I met in our mid-20s and had been married 6 years by the time this happened. We lived in Barhaven, a suburb south of Ottawa, in a semi-detached we'd bought the year before our son was born. The neighborhood was the kind of place where people cleared each other's driveways after a heavy snowfall and left garden zucchini on porches in August without ringing the bell. Our house was nothing remarkable. 3 bedrooms, a small backyard, a kitchen we'd repainted twice and still weren't happy with. But it was ours, and it was full, and for most of those years it felt like exactly enough. We had 2 children. Arlo was 10 that winter, the kind of boy who collected information the way other kids collect hockey cards. He could name every provincial capital, the wingspan of a peregrine falcon, the exact distance in kilometers from Ottawa to the moon. He was serious and interior, and he kept a great deal inside himself, which I had always understood as just the shape of him. Our daughter Lottie was 4. She was Arlo's opposite in almost every way. Loud, reckless, affectionate in the way small children are when they haven't yet learned that love can be withdrawn. She adored her brother. When he was at school, she carried his worn-out stuffed bear from room to room as a substitute. Brett was a project manager for a civil engineering firm that held contracts across the country. He traveled to Calgary twice a month every month for 2 years running. He called every night. He was home every other weekend without fail. I told myself 1,000 times that we were managing. What I hadn't said out loud, what I had been very carefully not saying, was that every time Brett left, Pauline arrived. Brett's father, Gerald, had died of a heart attack 3 years before Lottie was born. A Saturday morning, no warning. It had left Pauline alone in the house in Nepean, where Brett and his sister Regan had grown up. Pauline had been a school nurse for 26 years before she retired, competent, organized, deeply certain of her own judgment, which had served her well in a clinic, and which created a particular kind of friction in every room she entered as a guest. After Gerald died, she came around more. It made sense. Brett was her only son. Arlo was her first grandchild. Grief needed somewhere to go. I told myself I was glad to have the help. That sentence, "I'm glad to have the help," is the one I used for almost 2 years to talk myself out of my own instincts. The override started the way these things always start, slowly, with kindness. She would drop by on a Wednesday when Brett was away and bring a casserole, which was generous, except she'd rearrange the fridge while she was there, and mention that Lottie needed more iron in her diet. She took Arlo for a haircut once without asking, and said she'd done it as a favor, because I'd seemed run off my feet. When I told her carefully I would have liked to be there, she tilted her head and said I was being a bit sensitive, and that she was only trying to help. I closed my mouth. I had been closing my mouth around Pauline since the year Brett and I got married. In October, Brett sat with me after dinner and said his mother had offered to stay during his Calgary weeks, just while the kids were young, just until things settled. She could take Lottie to her appointments, pick up Arlo from school, make sure nobody was having frozen dinners 3 nights running. "She's lonely," Brett said. "And she's family." I said yes. I said yes because I loved my husband, because Pauline was genuinely lonely, because Arlo was having a hard transition to a new school division that fall, and his teacher had mentioned he seemed withdrawn, and because I was tired in the specific way that comes from managing everything alone for months. Yes seemed easier than the argument that would follow no. She moved into our guest room the first week of November. I noticed things that winter and I filed them away, without looking at them directly, the way you file a bill you're afraid to open. Arlo had stopped coming to find me after school. He used to come straight to the kitchen, drop his bag, and talk for 10 minutes without stopping, whatever had happened, whatever question had been sitting in him all day. After November, he went to wherever Pauline was. I'd hear them talking in low voices that went quiet when I came in, not dramatically, just the way a conversation folds itself away. He began calling her Nan Pauline in a way that felt slightly different from how he'd said it before, softer, more private. There was a tablet on his bookshelf I didn't recognize, an older model in a dark green silicone case. When I asked about it, Arlo picked it up quickly and said Nan Pauline had given it to him for his reading apps. I told myself I'd look into it when things were less busy. I told myself that a great deal. His teacher, Ms. Hebert, emailed me in January to say Arlo had been drawing the same image during free time. A house with all its lights off. Nothing alarming, she wrote. She just thought I should know. I printed the email, put it in a kitchen drawer, and told myself children went through phases. Then came the Thursday in February. The Ottawa School Board had sent an automated notification at 12:30. Early dismissal, students out by 1:15, weather advisory in effect. Pauline had been picking up Arlo most days. She would have received the message too. I drove out of the downtown parking garage in the kind of citywide slowdown the capital gets 3 or 4 times every winter, sat on the Queensway for 40 minutes, covering 2 kilometers at a time. By the time I turned onto our street, it was nearly 3:45. I came in through the side door. Arlo was standing in the front hallway in his winter jacket, with his school backpack on his back, and a second bag, a duffel I had never seen, at his feet. Pauline stood near the front door with her coat on, her keys looped over one finger, and that patient, ready smile. Arlo looked at her before he looked at me. "Where are you going?" I asked. He glanced at Pauline, just that, just a small, sideways glance. But it ran through me like cold water, because what it meant was, I need to check with her first. Pauline said they were heading to her place for a few nights. Arlo had been asking to sleep over. A spontaneous little adventure. The snow day had made it feel like a good idea. She'd tried to text me, but the signal was terrible. I checked my phone. No text. I looked at the duffel bag. "How long are you packed for?" I asked Arlo. He looked at Pauline. "Arlo," I said, "I'm asking you." He looked down at his boots. "Just a few days," he said quietly. "Nan Pauline said it would be good, while Dad's away." I asked Pauline to wait in the living room. I knelt in front of my son and I asked him, as steadily as I could manage, whether going was his idea, or hers. He didn't answer for a long moment. Then he said something that didn't make sense to me in the hallway, but that I have gone back to 1,000 times since. "She said you need a break from us," he said. "She said you'll feel better if it's just you for a while." I made myself breathe. I told Pauline she needed to go home. I told her I appreciated her being there and that I'd call her in the morning. She left without argument, just gave Arlo a long, slow hug at the door, the kind with her face pressed into his hair. He hugged her back with both arms and did not look at me. When the door closed, I sat down on the hallway floor in my coat with Lottie on my lap, and I stayed there for a long time. That night, after the children were in bed, I called Brett. I told him what had happened. There was a silence, and then he said gently that his mother meant well. I heard myself say probably right. I hated myself a little for it. But I was so tired, and the argument felt impossible to have over the phone at 9 at night, with him in a hotel room in Alberta. I couldn't sleep. I lay in the spare room. I'd moved there when Pauline started staying so she could be closer to Lottie at night, which I had agreed to, and which now felt like one more thing I didn't know how to name. And I made myself think clearly. The next morning I opened Arlo's tablet. He'd left it charging in his room. The screen opened without a passcode. I told myself it was intrusive. I opened it anyway. There were reading apps, just like Pauline had said. And there was a messaging application I hadn't given him, connected to a number saved under a contact labeled NP. Nan Pauline. I read for a long time. The messages went back to September. For the first 2 months they were warm and ordinary. Funny videos, little jokes, questions about his day. Then they shifted. November. Is your mom stressed lately? I worry about her. She takes on too much. December. Your mom lost her patience with Lottie today over something small. Did that scare you? You can tell me anything. January. When a mom is very tired for a long time, sometimes she needs help she can't ask for herself. That's what I'm here for. That's what I've always been here for with your dad. And then, sent the afternoon before the snow day, hours before she ever arrived at our door. I think the time is nearly here, sweetheart. I want to make sure you feel safe. You can always come to me. That's our agreement, remember? Our special plan. Their special plan. I set the tablet on the kitchen table and sat with my hands flat on the wood, trying to stay connected to something solid. The drawings, the email from Miss Hebert. The way he'd been going quiet when I walked into rooms, the way he'd checked Pauline's face before looking at me. I went upstairs to his room. The bookshelf, the desk, a small spiral-bound notebook sitting half-hidden under a library book. On the first page, in Pauline's handwriting, "This is our special journal. Write down the things that worry you. I will always read them." Arlo had filled 12 pages, every entry dated, going back to October. Small ordinary things. Mom forgot to pack my lunch. Mom burned the pasta and said a bad word. Mom and Dad were on the phone a long time and she cried after. The kind of failures every parent commits on a hard week, collected and dated like exhibits. And in red pen, in the margins, in Pauline's handwriting, a response to every single one. You can tell me anything. Your mom isn't bad, she's just tired. But when someone is tired for too long, sometimes they can't be what their children need. I will always choose you first. I will never be too tired for you. I turned to the last page, dated 5 days before. Arlo's handwriting. I don't know if Mom loves me as much as she used to. She always seems so far away. Underneath it in red, she loves you in her way. But I love you more completely than she does. I have always loved you more. Remember that. I had to sit down on the floor of my son's room because my legs stopped working. I sat there holding that notebook until my hands stopped shaking. Then I called Brett. Not at 9 o'clock. Right then. He picked up on the second ring. I read him the last entry. I read him Pauline's response. There was a silence long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. Then Brett said, "I'm coming home." 14 hours from Calgary to Ottawa. He was in our kitchen by 7 the next morning, still in yesterday's clothes, and the first thing he did was read the whole notebook. He was quiet for a long time after he finished. "She did this with me when I was small," he said finally, "when my dad was still alive. She used to tell me Dad didn't understand me the way she did. I thought that was just how she was." He put the notebook down. I didn't know what it was until right now. We went through the tablet messages together. Then Brett opened the home security app. He'd had a camera installed at the front door, and one in the living room 2 summers back after a break-in on our street, and he started scrolling through saved footage. He found it on the 9th of November. Arlo was supposed to be in bed. The motion sensor had caught activity in the living room at 10:15. On the small screen, Pauline sat on the couch with Arlo tucked in beside her under a blanket. Her voice was so low we had to hold the phone between us with the volume at full. The microphone caught every word. "Your mom doesn't always know what she needs," she was saying. Patient, certain. The voice she used when she had already decided something. "You're a perceptive boy, Arlo, and I think you already know that something isn't quite right at home." Arlo's voice small and a little sleepy. "She seems tired." "She is tired. She's been tired for a very long time. A pause. When your daddy was little and something was wrong, he always came to me. He knew I was the one who could make things right. I want you to feel the same way. Can you do that? Then Arlo. Okay. Good boy, that's our secret for now, just yours and mine. Brett stopped the recording. He pressed both palms against the table and looked at the ceiling. Then he picked the phone back up and started downloading everything. It took most of the day. He backed everything up to his laptop and pushed a second copy to a cloud account Pauline had never had access to. When he finished, he went into the app settings and removed her guest access. She'd had it since her first stay so she could check on the kids from her phone, and he changed the code on the garage key lockbox. 17 minutes after he revoked her access, the app pushed a notification. A secondary user attempted to delete a shared device. Pauline at that moment had been trying to wipe the living room camera from her phone. She missed by less than 20 minutes. We found a child and family therapist through our family doctor, a referral through OHIP with a wait of about 3 weeks, which felt like an eternity and which we used to prepare. Her name was Dr. Ostrowski, and she had a quiet office in Centertown with soft chairs and a sand tray in the corner that Arlo immediately went to investigate. She saw him 3 times in the first month, gently, without leading him. At the end of those sessions, she sat with Brett and me and said, in careful professional language, that what Arlo described was consistent with a child who had been taught, gradually and by someone he trusted, to misread a safe parent as an absent one. She offered to put her clinical observations in writing. I said yes without hesitating. Arlo drew a house in Dr. Ostrowski's office. The lights were off, the same as in Ms. Haber's reports. But on his 3rd visit, he drew it again. This time he put a light on in the front window. Dr. Ostrowski told me later that the light was the most hopeful thing she'd seen from him. At home, he started finding his way back to me. Not in a single moment, not like a switch. Over weeks and then months, in the smallest increments, he started sitting near me in the evenings. He started bringing me things. A rock, a fact, a question he'd been carrying all day. One afternoon, he climbed onto the couch beside me while Lottie was napping and leaned his head against my shoulder, and I stayed very still because I was afraid of scaring it off, this ordinary thing that had stopped being ordinary. Regan had known something was wrong without knowing the details. She called Brett in early March to say their mother wanted a family conversation, a chance to clear the air. I recognized that phrase. A chance to clear the air meant, come sit in a room and let me explain myself before anything becomes permanent. We went. Regan hosted it at her place in Canada on a Sunday afternoon. Pauline arrived before we did. When Brett and I walked in, she was seated in the living room with a cup of tea, composed and ready, and she spoke first. She was good. I want to be honest about that. She told her version with real tears in her eyes, and it was almost convincing because she believed every word of it. She spoke about loving those children more than anything, about stepping in because someone had to, about watching Lauren seem to drift further from herself and doing what family is supposed to do. She looked at Brett when she said it and not at me. Brett's Aunt Celia, who had driven in from Gloucester and had no idea what she had walked into, nodded with genuine sympathy. When Pauline finished, she looked at me. I know you think I overstepped, she said gently, but everything I did came from love. I had Brett's phone in my hand. I pressed play. Her own voice filled the room in Kanata at 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. Your mom doesn't always know what she needs. You're a perceptive boy, Arlo, and I think you already know that something isn't quite right at home. And then Arlo's small voice, okay. Good boy, that's our secret for now, just yours and mine. I let it finish, then I stopped it. Nobody breathed. Pauline said quickly that it was out of context, that we didn't understand the full conversation, that a recording couldn't possibly. I laid 3 things on the coffee table. Dr. Ostrowski's written clinical observations, a printed summary of the notebook entries with dates, Pauline's margin notes included, A chronological log of the tablet messages laid against Arlo's school behavior reports. "This is what you told my son about me over 6 months," I said. "And this is what a child therapist observed after sitting with him 3 times. I'm not asking anyone to believe me. I'm asking you to listen to your own voice." Regan had picked up the printed messages and was reading. Her face had changed. Celia was very still. The silence was the longest I have ever sat inside. And then Pauline, I think it came out of somewhere she hadn't planned to open, the way true things sometimes do when the rehearsed version finally fails, said, "I would have been a better mother to that boy than she has ever been. I was better for Brett. I could have been better for Arlo. You know I could have." The words fell into the room and stayed, and everyone heard them for exactly what they were. Not concern, not love. Acclaim. Regan set the pages down on the table. Brett stood up. He walked to Regan's front door and held it open and did not say anything at all. Pauline left. The consequences came the way real ones do, not dramatically, but in a series of quiet, certain steps. Brett changed every lock in our house the following week and rebuilt all our accounts from scratch. We consulted a family lawyer, a woman named Miss Partridge who practiced in Centertown, and she told us that what we had on record, the audio clips, the notebook, the therapist's report, constituted solid grounds for a formal contact restriction. We filed a restraining order application 3 weeks later. I sent a short email to Ms. Hebert explaining that all concerns in Arlo's file had come from a single family member and asking the school to update the record accordingly. Ms. Hebert wrote back within 24 hours to say it was done. My neighbor Sheila came over the following Saturday, the way she sometimes did, and I told her everything, start to finish. She had spoken with Pauline over our back fence more than once that winter without knowing what she had walked into. She cried, and she apologized, and she meant it, and I told her there was nothing to apologize for. Regan called twice, once to apologize herself, and once to say she had confronted her mother directly and that it had not gone well, and that she needed time to reckon with what she now understood about her own childhood. I told her to take whatever time she needed. That was a road no one else could walk for her. Pauline sent a letter. It arrived in a pale blue envelope with my name in her careful handwriting on the front. I recognized the handwriting from the notebook margins. I put it unopened into the documentation folder and set it on the high shelf in the closet. There was no court date, no arrest. I weighed it and decided that putting Arlo on a witness stand at 10 years old was not worth whatever satisfaction might come from it. What Pauline lost instead was the one thing she had spent 6 months trying to take: access. She would never again be alone with my children, and every person who might once have handed Arlo to her now understood precisely why. My in-laws did not become different people overnight, and I stopped expecting them to. Brett's relationship with his mother did not heal quickly. He carried both guilt about his childhood and grief about what she had done, and sometimes those two things pulled in opposite directions. I learned to sit beside him in the quiet without pushing. He would find his way in his own time. Arlo came back to me slowly. I need you to understand that. Slowly. Not in a single hug or one session with Dr. Ostrowski. Over weeks and then months, in the smallest possible increments. He started leaving his bedroom door open. He started telling me the things he used to tell me. He asked me once, carefully, whether he had done something wrong by writing in the notebook. I told him the same thing Dr. Ostrowski had told him, that grown-ups are the ones responsible for the secrets they ask children to keep, not the children, that a secret that frightens you is not a real secret. It's just a grown-up being wrong. He thought about that for a while. Then he nodded. Then he climbed into my lap, which he hadn't done since he was 6, and I sat very still and did not cry until after he went to bed. One morning in April, he brought a drawing down to the kitchen and set it on the counter in front of me with both hands, the way you offer something you've been working on carefully. He stood watching me look at it. It was a house. Every window was lit. The front door was open, and in the doorway stood a small figure, and the figure was letting someone in. I kept drawing the wrong picture, Arlo said. This one's the right one. I put it on the refrigerator next to Lottie's macaroni art and the school council form I kept forgetting to return, right where I would see it every morning. That spring, Brett and I went out for dinner for the first time in almost a year, not an anniversary, not a special occasion, just a Thursday when Regan offered to take the kids, and we said yes. We went to a place on Elgin Street with cloth napkins and a wait list. We put our phones on the table, face up. The security app was open. The camera showed our front hallway, the living room with the lamp on, everything still. We stayed until closing and drove home slowly, and when we came in through the side door, Arlo's coat was on the hook, and Lottie's boots were by the mat, and the house was exactly the way we had left it. I used to believe that keeping the peace and keeping people safe were the same thing. I built half my life on that mistake, the way you build on ground you haven't tested. I know now that they are not the same, and that sometimes you have to sacrifice one to protect the other, and that doing it does not make you unkind. It makes you clear. The most dangerous harm I have ever encountered did not raise its voice. It spoke softly to a child at 10 o'clock at night under a blanket. It called itself love. It kneeled down to my son's eye level and said, "I will always choose you first," and it meant it as a taking. Trust is not owed because someone shares your blood or has been in your life a long time. It is earned. It can be unearned. And protecting your children sometimes means locking a door on someone you once opened it for, and meaning it, and not going back. A few weeks after it was all settled, the applications filed, the locks changed, the school notified. I was doing dishes at the kitchen sink on a Sunday afternoon when the motion alert chimed on the counter behind me, front door, and for one siglomashikel's whole body went cold, the exact way it had that February afternoon in the hallway when I found my son already packed. Then I heard Arlo come pounding down the stairs, calling out that Dad was home from the grocery store. The front door swung open. Lottie shrieked with joy from the living room and launched herself toward the sound of it. Brett came in from the cold with bags on both arms and Lottie hanging off his leg, and Arlo was already talking. Something about a falcon, something he'd read, his voice up and easy and completely unguarded. I dried my hands and went to meet them in the hall. The door was standing wide open. Afternoon light came in across the threshold, pale and cold and winter clean. My family was loud and warm, and none of them were being careful at all, and I stood in the middle of it and let it fill the house, and I did not need anything else in the world.